I'm going to present how to use the FastAPI Auth0 library and most importantly how to configure the Auth0 dashboard. I prepared the code here. It's just the example file from GitHub. Okay, so let's first create our API. This is the Auth0 management API. We can ignore it. So FastAPI 1. The identifier can be the URL of where you host your API, but it doesn't have to be a valid URL. The signing algorithm must be RS256 in order for the library to work. Okay. So we are creating it. Let's go to settings. It has an ID, an identifier which can be changed. All right. Let's begin to configure our variables. So the domain, the tenant domain, it's taken from an environment variable. So in this case, it would be FastAPI test u.auth0.com, and the audience is the API identifier. So this would be FastAPI 1. Okay, that's all. And we source the file. So now we have these variables. As you can see, good. Now we need to create an application as well. So let's go here. We already have by default some applications. So let's go to one of them and see that it has an ID, a secret, and a couple of settings. But at this point, we are ready to start our FastAPI app. Yeah, let's try this. Let's go to docs. Okay, so we have our endpoints. We have the public endpoint. Let's try it out. Okay, nothing special here. We have the authorize button. So we have two schemas. Basically, the implicit scheme and a bearer scheme, which happens when we do this. Okay, so we could always paste our token here manually, or we could log in interactively with the client ID, but we're going to do that later as it's a bit more involved. So let's try secure endpoint. Okay, it's forbidden as expected. All right, now let's try with our application. So let's obtain a token. This is a machine-to-machine application. So this would be, say, a command line interface, something like that. Let's go to quick start. No, APIs. And let's enable okay. And quick start. So we already have this example where the page obtains a token using the client ID and client secret. So let's copy the token. Let's paste it here. Okay, click authorize. So let's execute now. All right, so now we're authenticated. As we can see, we have a request everything normal. The ID is this one. So if you notice, this ID is actually the client ID. Well, it's only this part. So at clients is typical for this part is typical for any machine-to-machine application, whereas this string is the identifier. All right, and permissions none, email none. This is normal so far. Let's try to. So we've accessed the secure one. Let's see the secure one, which has scopes. Read blah blah. Yeah, let's try to access this now. See, it includes the token as a bearer. However, it's not working, but this is expected because it's missing the scope. Okay, so now how do we add the scope? We have to go first to the API. And we have to add the scope here. Read blah blah. It has to match exactly this value. All right. Test scope, whatever. Add. Now, this doesn't really authorize anything. This is just listing the possible permissions that this API has. Now, we have to authorize our machine-to-machine app, which is the... oh, I didn't save the name. Anyway, it was this one, I think. So we go here, and we have to enable this. Update. Continue. Yeah. The thing is this. This won't really change anything because the permissions are included in the token. So we have to obtain a new token. We could go here to test. So it works the same. Or we could go to applications. Quick start. Yeah, okay, let's actually save this CLI we said. Save. Yeah, so the token here. Okay, now after we added the permission, obtaining the token again means we have to input it back here. All right, so let's try just the secure one as before. Nothing changed. Okay. Permissions is none, but we're gonna get back to that. So execute. Now it works. With the scope, we are permitted this. And let's try blah blah 2, which really doesn't have any difference except that it does not have the implicit scheme. So if you click here, it's only the bearer that we can input, whereas with this one we could also interactively, yeah, but that's not really a big difference. So it works just the same. Now, how do we actually put, because it might seem a bit strange that we've added those permissions, but they don't appear here. So for that, we need to go back to the API. And we need to enable a certain setting. And that is to enable role-based access control and add permissions in the access token. We have to save. We have to obtain again a token, copy token. Okay, authorize, log out, log back in. All right, so let's do it again. Oh, it's missing the blah blah scope now. Well, that's strange. No, I think, yeah, this is the one. I've tried to obtain a token for the wrong application. right. Logout, authorize. So whether we go to the scope endpoint, so this is just the secure one without the blah blah scope required. Now that's just a requirement, okay? So that if the token does not have this permission, then it will be rejected with the 403 forbidden. Nevertheless, because we enable the add permissions to access token from the API, we do get the permissions here. So they're there, and similar way they would be here. All right, so that would be pretty much all for the M2M application. Now let's actually use real users. So how do we do that? We have to create a single page application for that. So let's go here. Oh man, Alt0 is kind of slow, but I get it. I mean, they have great free plan. Oh, bless me. Okay, create application, native. No, it's not native. I mean, we could do that too. All right. So the use case is that you copy the client ID and you put the client ID here. You check the scope that you want and you click authorize. But it's not going to work just yet because it's not in the list of allowed callback URLs. Okay, so let's get to here. Allowed callbacks URL. So we have to add the URL here. Okay, so that would be localhost AO1 docs. Yeah, this is the one, as far as I remember. So let's save the settings and let's try again. Wow, and it works. Good. So let's create a user. Yeah, it could be anything. We don't have email validation yet, so let's say test gmail.com. Yeah, use it, doesn't matter. Continue. So it's requesting access. Yeah, okay. Accept. So we have to log out from here so that we don't confuse tokens. Okay, so let's try now and see how it goes. So it looks different already. We have the ID auth0 602. Okay, still no permissions, still no email. That's normal for now. Let's try the scope. This should fail again. Yeah, it's missing the read blah blah scope. Now if we go to, well, first of all, actually, we have to, yeah, we have to give the permissions to the user directly. It's working differently than for the machine-to-machine application, where you're given the scope from the API, whereas here there's no such settings for the single page application, but we have to do it from the user management part. Okay, so here's the user ID. This is the ID that we're getting here. Permissions. We have to assign permissions. We have to select an API, FastAPI 1, read, blah, blah. Add permissions. All right. And we have to sign in again. So logout, authorize, accept. Good. So we have the permission here appearing, and this one works. All good. But how do we get the email? Well, let's get the email. There are a couple more steps to do that. So we have to go to the API. We have to create the OpenID profile email permission scope. That's a really special kind of scope. It's not your arbitrary scope. It has to be like this. So allow the API to obtain email address. We add this permission. Now we don't need to do anything else for the user. This is an implicit sort of permission. So we don't need to actually assign it to the user. But there's another thing we have to do. We have to go to rules. We have to create a rule. And that would be add email to access token. Now, it's not going to work. It's not going to work unless we correctly set the namespace. The namespace is hard-coded in the library, and there is no way to do it dynamically. So it's hard-coded currently to the URL of this project. So we just copy this. So keep that in mind, even if this project is forked, but the value is not, I can show you where the value is actually defined. It's right here. So auth0 rule namespace. Yeah, if you don't change this value, even if the project is forked, of course, you still have to use this value. Okay, namespace. Okay, don't forget delete the trailing slash. You want to separate that for the email. Good, so that's all. We have to save the changes. Yeah, okay, we try again. Okay, the rule was changed. So let's do it again. Let's log out and let's log back in. And let's execute. And here we go, the email, test@gmail.com, which is the email that we used earlier. All right, so it works. What's the deal with the audience? So I've noticed that many, or quite a few libraries don't properly validate the audience. So let's check that this one does it. So let's go back again to the test application. No, right. Sorry, we have to create a new API for that. Yep. So we have to create FastAPI 2. Oh. We could go ahead and give it the same permissions and blah blah, but Let's enable the same application as for that one. Right. So now the scenario is that this shouldn't work because we have the audience set to FastAPI 1. And if we try to obtain a token for with the same application, FastAPI 1 CLI, but it has a different audience identifier. So if we use this, it should flat out reject it. Okay, log out here, use the bearer token, authorize, okay, execute. So here we go, invalid token claims. It asks us to please check the issuer and audience, obviously, because the audience is incorrect. So now if we set this somehow FastAPI 2, we source run it again, and we execute. Now it's going to work because we have the right audience, and now the client ID is the same, of course, but that doesn't really matter. So yeah, I think I've covered most aspects. Now let's try to get a social connection working. Yeah, let's try to sign up using GitHub. So we go to connections, social. Let's try to create a connection. Yeah, I think Google is by default enabled. Let's try to sign up using GitHub. Yeah, just a click away. Okay, so I figured how to log out. Well, we can only do that once, but we have to open a new private window. Okay, and we put our client ID. Remember, that's the client ID from Auth0, not from GitHub. So now let's continue with GitHub. There we go, sign in. Yes, it asks for the email because we ticked that box when we added the social connection. Authorize, okay. The client ID are incorrect. Well, maybe that's just Swagger. I think I know. Okay, let's try once again. I think I just copied the client secret incorrectly. Except, yep, the wrong client secret. So let's execute. And there we go. The ID is GitHub. And we have the email of my GitHub account. And secure scope should work as well. Of course. Missing read blah blah scope. Yes, I think I did. No, I asked for it. I know, we have to go to the user. Here's the user. You have to assign the permission. FastAPI. One, because FastAPI 2 will not work. It does not have that thing yet, so we have to check it back here. Add, come on. Applications. What was our application? My app2, client ID copy. Scope authorize. Yes, yes, I accept. So it works now. Okay. The scope, the permission, the email, everything. So that would be all.